This interview was recorded live during one of our Government Design Finland network meetings, where we bring together designers working in the public sector in Finland. At the end, my colleagues in the network jump in with their own questions, which make it more dynamic. I started experimenting with this format earlier this year, and so far I have done 4 of these live interviews with the group. I love having co-pilots, other designers who bring fresh perspectives and ask questions I might not think of. It's great because those listening in can spot things I have missed or see new angles for the conversation that I didn't catch. This approach opens up the podcast format, making it collaborative and not just me leading the interview. The person I interviewed today is a person I really admired, so I felt some pressure to get a good interview. Yoko Akama is a Japanese design researcher based in Australia. We talk about a mentoring network that offers peer-to-peer support to women in Asia. And this led us to open the conversation to cultural differences, hierarchies, leadership, and domestic practices of bathing and repairing. My name is Mariana Salgado, this is Diseño y Diáspora.
My name is Akama Yoko, or Yoko Akama. I'm a design researcher and teacher, but also I'm a Japanese woman, and I now live on the lands of the Worong and Bunurong language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, which is now called Melbourne, Australia. As customary for most occasions, I like to also just do a brief acknowledgement of country, which is a way that we pay respects to the traditional custodians. But I like to do this in my native tongue, which is Japanese. That's okay. 皆様こんにちは。今住んでいる土地、クーリンネーションの東部、ウォイウォロンとブンウォロン先住民、そしてこの民族の祖先と過去、現在新しい長老に敬意を示したいと思います。アボリジナルトレス海峡諸島民は統治権を譲渡しておらず、7万5千年以上持続されている文化と創造性、特にデザイン、研究と教育がこの土地と水源を守り育んできたことに深く感謝し、さらにこのポッドキャストが聞かれているさまざまな土地の伝統的カストディアン、そして皆様の祖先と家族やコミュニティで引き継がれている知恵を尊敬する気持ちでこのトークを始めたいと思います。よろしくお願いします。So what I just did was to pay my respects to the traditional custodians that are here, to the traditional custodians of where you are, and also to your rich ancestries and heritage that have supported your sustainment to be here with us today.
Thank you. That was very nice. And tell us, what's your story in the design world? What did you study?
Well, I did most of my education outside of Japan. So I did my sort of high school in the UK and some in the States, and then returned to the UK to work, and then did my PhD in Australia. So in Anglophonic countries. And my first degree was in visual communication. But my design career has been in nonprofit organizations, mainly in human rights. And that sort of passion for social justice and self-determination is a very big underpinning of the work I continue to do now in academia.
Okay, so we can jump straight to the work that you are doing. What are you researching now?
I do a variety of things, and one of the things that is quite exciting, to give you an example, is the network that, or learning platform and a network that I co-founded with a friend and a peer called Professor Joyce Yee from Northumbria University in the UK. And this platform is called Designing Entangled Social Innovation in Asia Pacific. The purpose of the learning platform or this network very much probably coincides or resonates with some of the work that you're doing there, Mariana, is design was or has been, well, the conversations around design, I should say, has been emerging in the Asia Pacific. But we were also worried about the Western importation of design via readings and methods in our region that might displace or even cover over, suppress the many kinds of designing and innovation that had already been parts of our lands. So the learning platform was a way to create a supportive network of mutual learning so that we can share and think with and learn from one another. And one of the examples of this work, so it's kind of event-based, but from this work, we also do several projects. And there are sort of several things that we've been doing so far, but one has been around mentoring and realizing that many practitioners who we were meeting were lacking the opportunity to be mentored. And so I'm distinguishing that from formal education to build their capacities. So we've been doing a mentoring program for a number of years now.
What does it mean to be mentored? Because this is something that we haven't done in our network. So I would like to understand, how did you organize it and what is this being mentored?
So the focus of our mentoring primarily is for women. And we that is partly because we are lacking resources for it to be offered to everybody. And because the work that we're also interested in is in social change, the focus of support had been to look at the sort of support and care women give in their communities, and yet they often don't have any formal support or any resources to help them build their capacities. So the mentoring network is a peer-to-peer support network. So we cluster women in thematic groups, or perhaps even sometimes not even kind of formalized that way. It might be much more informal, where we support it's usually gathering online. And we might kind of maybe think about them as these pods of women, of 3 to 4 women who meet semi-regularly, and they are able to talk to one another and share concerns or problem solve or share resources and things like that. And one of the main thing that's come out of that is not so much about how best to mentor. So it's not so much about the sort of methodology, but what it means to share through difference. So women who are part of this mentoring program or have been part of the mentoring program, intersectionally very diverse. So they are meeting and talking with other women from Malaysia or Australia or Japan and or Thailand or in other parts of the Asia Pacific region. So you can't sort of assume that you know who they are and where they come from. So there's the willingness to and the curiosity to encounter one another and to learn and to learn about the cultural differences or what sort of issues are shaping the lived experiences of the people who they're talking to is a really big part of the learning process.
Do I understand well that all these women, they are from the Asian Pacific area, but they might be living all around the world, right?
No, they're specifically in Asia Pacific, yes.
So they are also living in there because you are so aware of these cultural differences. So I thought that they might not be living in their own countries.
Well, I think some of them, yes, but like many of us, we are not of the countries that we live. So the women who are part of the program might be in Thailand or in Japan, but they might not be from there, if that makes sense. And the other commonality might be that some of the women, again, like myself, have been educated in various different locations. There is not to say that all women would have had a postgraduate education. In fact, probably not. But we still need to speak in English. So there is a level of education and a willingness to sort of speak in English to. We also navigate those tricky language differences as well. But I think the expectations of the difference has been a really important part of the learning.
And do you share like a discipline? Are you in the creative industry, all of you?
Yes, yeah.
So you are most designers and artists in this network, yes. Okay, what came out of all this work? Because I guess it's difficult to document when is this a mentoring program, when it's on conversations one-to-one. How do you analyze and document what has happened during this mentoring?
Yeah. So this is was a funded research. So yes, we had to document and analyze what we were doing, and primarily those were done by interviews, and also a series of workshops we ran and checked So there were other kinds of ways that members of the project team from our network would join their mentoring cluster pods to observe or to listen. So there were a number of ways we were understanding what was happening. And again, for us, it's been really important to change our perceptions around leadership, for example. So notions of leadership tends to be defined in the Western sense. So it's the individual, it's about the authorities or power that they might hold. But we also recognize that for women located in, mainly Asia and Southeast Asia, that isn't really an identity that they preferred. But yet they were doing things that were supporting and inspiring others. So that was a really important thing for us to learn from and to mutually recognize. Another thing that had come out, which we sort of did present this at a conference in participatory design, is that, and this might be interesting for your listeners who are located in, say, maybe Finland, is the notion of hierarchy. So again, the Western assumption is that hierarchy is bad because of the worry about authority and then the sort of harmful power that can come through the authority of a hierarchy. Whereas hierarchy is a common cultural condition for women in Asia or Asian Pacific. And so how we work with that is what's also just as important. And for many of us who grew up with structures of hierarchy in a supportive and respectful way, where elders who are more senior than us in their position or age or experience is quite natural for us to want to learn from this. So instead of trying to sort of flatten the sort of the various positionalities of the women who were part of this program, we were trying to respect the hierarchies that each of us was already part of, but to be quite careful about those hierarchies not becoming disempowering or becoming harmful.
Well, this is about being cultural sensitive, no? Like to understand that the hierarchies, because in a way, I think that at least in Finland, we try to say that, well, in certain teams, we don't have hierarchies. And in fact, there is always hidden hierarchies there. No, like they exist anyway because of majority, because of age, because of different, because of language skills, because of different issues that mark the hierarchies in a working space.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the things that you talk is about the invisible design and the emotional labor that goes in some design projects. And I wanted you to ask you about this emotional labor, because this is something that also came from the work in this platform.
Yeah. So, emotional labor is just a term that we use to recognize and acknowledge the work that is emotional, and also how those range. It's so emotion being a whole range of things, as an important disposition and approach to the way that we were doing and supporting the mentoring program. This is what is, I guess, we were contrasting this with what often doesn't get recognized, say, even in participatory or co-design, because of the preset ideas about process. When how you help a room be more comfortable, how you host by having warming cups of tea, or anticipating how busy, often the women that were part of the mentoring program were joining at night, often with children maybe in the background. So these are some of these things that we had noticed about the complex living and professional experience of the women, made us more attentive to how we thought about care and kindness and generosity, which was a big part of the mentoring atmosphere, as well as the atmosphere that we wanted to create. But it's also something you can't manufacture. You can't just say, "Oh, we are going to be caring from 3 o'clock. We're gonna start doing this." No, in fact, those practices come from somewhere else. We learn how to be caring, how to be kind, how to be generous in in our other in our lives, in being taught by our families, our cultural backgrounds. So we were recognizing all these things that are often invisible because of the designer persona that might not recognize the cultural backgrounds or the lived experiences of the designer individual. Yet, in fact, but those things are brought into these moments that are really important. So that's what we called sometimes things that aren't as visible, or perhaps even recognized, because it's not it's not a skill. It's not something that you learn formally, but it's actually a really significant part of what we did do in this mentoring program. But we also propose how much of that is an important aspect of what we do when we're, leaning into quite challenging social issues as well.
One of the things that you were doing is taking special care of one group that was not very empowered, or very, that you wanted that everybody could really take hands and appropriate the project, and you realized that one group was needed special support. Could you tell us about what did you do?
I think what, Miranda, you're referring to is clusters of mentoring that were where the mentor themselves were not feeling that confident, and so she was suggesting to us how she could collaborate more with her mentees, because she was a curator and an artist, and the mentees that were also artists as well. So that ended up becoming a really beautiful collaboration through exchanges of making things, or exhibiting things, or and doing sort of various other things. So it was, once we sort of, I guess, listened to what their worries were or their concerns were, or and often which had a lot to do with confidence, and what support that we could provide to, I guess, support their own nourishing, or the nourishing of one another. We were basically just sort of following their suggestions and what they were trying to do. So it was kind of a really remarkable example of what could be possible when, I guess, you just invite people to contribute to things that they were interested in exploring themselves, and that's just one example of the sort of transformation that we witnessed through the program.
This episode is part of the lists D&D in English, Deconolizar, Australia y Diseño, Japón y Diseño, Diseño feminista y Diseño con perspectiva de género. Even though the titles of the list are in Spanish, you might find episodes in this list in English too. I am exploring how to make a multilingual podcast. Any suggestion on how to do it better is welcome. All the episodes in English can be found in the list D&D in English that at the moment has more than 40 episodes. I love Yoko's ideas of making us more attentive to care, kindness, and generosity. I guess she's talking not only in relation to our design practices, but also in everyday life. In some of our previous interviews, we also tackle matters of care. For example, with Blanca Cayenne in the episode 239, where she tells us about ecofeminist practices. Or with Airi Dordas Perpignan, we talk about designing with care in episode 347. She's an activist in issues related to care, and she tells us in that interview what she's doing from the Care Lab. I trace the links to other episodes in case you want to listen to others that have design practices around these topics. It is a way to help you to navigate into our episodes and draw connections within researchers and designers in different territories. I hope this is useful. Now let's continue listening to Yoko, that she has much more to tell us. So now I'm going to go to a very concrete question. How do you think we designers and researchers make sure that we are being culturally sensitive in our work? Do you have any tips or examples, approaches to keep cultural nuances front and in the center?
Yeah, so the key is in ourselves, I think, because we are all culturally diverse. I mean, even from myself as an example, there are multiple worlds already within my body through the lived experiences. And for many of you who might be the listeners, this could be also to do with your many heritages too. And the advice would be to first confirm that that's also one of your assets, or one of our assets, and to be a little bit worried about the perception that there is no culture, first of all, or that there is only one culture. This is the manufactured, maybe an ideology that tends to deny the fact that we are already quite diverse in so many different ways, only if we were to recognize them. So that's one thing I would also recommend. And then it's also about spending time and company with people who are diverse. I guess I find myself to be incredibly lucky to live on this continent now called Australia, and to live in a city that is diverse in so many different ways. And in most places of work, cities, this is also possible too. So the more we are spending that company and engaging with people of different backgrounds, I think that this would help. So these are, I'm sort of suggesting things that are doesn't come within a project timeframe, or it's not like a training program. I guess it's really about how we are living already, which then comes into, or comes moves through our work. That it, if we could be more heightened in our consciousness and sensitivity there, I have a tendency to believe that that's what then, you bring that into the project time frame, or you bring that into a moment of a co-designing workshop or something like that.
In a way that there are not shortcuts, but we have to involve this as part of our everyday life experience.
Yeah, and I'm also want to maybe not suggest that this is an easy thing to do either, because I think, for some people, the cultural heritage, cultural identities could be quite painful. If I know lots of people with diasporic backgrounds, or also even if we were to elevate the politics more to think about the impacts of colonialism. So it's to be able to have immediate access, or to understand the knowledge systems of which we are already benefiting from many. I'm sort of not suggesting that we can just take that for granted, but I think for me it's about recognizing the complex histories of all of our life and families, and many people who are already around us already. And the curious and open and careful stances to recognize, to listen, to learn from, I think is a really important part of our own education and own learning, as well as design practices also.
And where do you think your practice is going in the future? Where do you want to that your work goes?
I mentioned earlier the work around social justice and self-determination are really big parts of my career trajectory, I guess, or something like that. And we are in a really tricky time where there's a lot of fragmentation and there's a lot of extremism that I think we are witnessing everywhere around the world. And the work that I feel I can do is through my teaching and education, and also my research, to address why and how we can continue to be curious about each other's differences again. That doesn't shut down a conversation, or doesn't end up just having a conversation within a small bubble, because the differences is the strength I still continue to believe in. It's just that certain agendas and certain politics and certain power become amplified or dominate, and that becomes really problematic. That creates the exclusionary systems and structures that we see and we have inherited. So I don't really see myself as being able to change structures of power because they're so, massive and entrenched. But my work is to contribute towards an attitude of learning, so that intergenerationally we might be able to move the needle a little bit around some of these issues.
And what concrete things are you going to do in your teaching research practice that will contribute to change this attitude of learning?
One of the things I do a lot is to teach my students that Western knowledge system isn't just the only knowledge system. The re-education for many people in Australia, but also we have students from overseas who come to Australia who may not know the existence of Indigenous knowledges, and Indigenous knowledges in plural in this place now called Australia, and how much of that is an important learning and recognition, but also how much of that as wisdom can teach us about what futures can become, because of the resilience and practices that are actually tethered to ways of caring and tethered to ways of respecting not just one another, but broader ecologies. I mean, there's a lot that I think we can all learn from this. And then there's the learning that I am also doing from my own small, tiny little archipelago called Japan. And the work I'm doing in my research there is to look at those everyday practices. I'm learning a lot around bathing, for example. I'm learning a lot about repairing. So these are often domestic practices, again, not really noticed a lot as, design or strategic design or participatory design, but in fact, they actually teach me a lot.
Open the mic if whoever want to make questions, please go ahead.
I have a question about organizing the mentoring groups or the pods. Do you have some kind of like a system or a standardized setup, or is it something that the people of the pod kind of make up or like negotiate by themselves based on what their goals are and needs?
Yeah, good question. We tend to do things organically because we discovered, which is almost like a obvious thing, that mentoring is just another different kind of relationship. So unless you build the relationship in the first place, it's actually difficult to even have a mentoring relationship also. So it's really important for women to get to know one another first. For a previous mentoring program, we did this over distance because not everybody was located in the same city or country. So we did things like gifts exchange, where we encouraged the women to send gifts to one another as a way to introduce themselves, to tell us a little bit more about their practices or their cultural background or things like that. So other than sort of trying to keep the pods or the clusters quite small, we were wanting to follow and support the relationship building as the organizing principle, if you like, and then to support the growth of the relationship first, and to invite women to also connect with one another in different ways. So you might sort of have your pods that then gets established, but then could sort of be able to sort of cross-pollinate also with other women too, which might not be a mentoring relationship, but it might be a different kind of dialogue or a different kind of engagement. So yeah, we learned a lot again through that process ourselves, because mentoring tends to, well, some of the things that we know from mentoring, particularly in professional development, is so much about the relationship being prescribed already. So it's usually often maybe somebody who's higher up in your organization mentoring a junior person, or maybe there's a training program that you join and the content is already set. Like, we removed all of that and tried out the relationship first principle in our approach.
And what is the follow-up question? What is the feedback that you get from the people mentored, like the women that were mentored? How was for them?
Yeah. So this is like a new to them, and as much as it was new to us. And we were very upfront about our desire to do this via co-design, and maybe that might mean that we might not be that clear or certain about what we should be doing, but always our stance would be to listen and to talk and to get their input. So some of the mentors were quite understandably confused at the beginning. And some of the women who we also did speak with, who have some experience of being mentored, assumed that there would be, there'll be like a, 12-week program or something where they'll be doing this and doing that, and they'll learn all their business strategies and something like this. And we said, no, we're not doing that. We don't have any content. So I'm sure the first few months was kind of a bit strange. But I think the relationship building was also the relationship building with ourselves, as in the project team who were hosting the mentoring program. So as we started to learn about one another, I think it became sort of quite obvious that we were trying to work this out in a way that we weren't sure, they weren't sure, but let's work it out together in that spirit. And eventually the women who were mentored were able to work out the sort of conversations or the themes they want to share or discuss, emerging naturally out of their relationships, and that then transitioning into building the confidence or building some kind of capacities that were helpful to them. So yeah, I guess it's again, I mean, for us who are listeners to this is a like typical kind of participatory approach that we can't really guarantee what the outcomes are, but you see the possibility of what it could become because you're building on and incorporating, as many input and feedback and assets as possible, as many as the women who were part of the program. So even for us, there were just so many delightful discoveries and learning. It's really helped me also because I was so, I guess, sort of brainwashed into thinking about this is what I need to be to be a senior academic, or this is what I'm sort of expected to become in a sort of professional sense. So it was really like, even though I wasn't in the mentoring program, I was osmotically, like almost byproduct of running this program, learning so much about my own capacity building, what I was assuming, what I had to let go, what I had to relearn, all these sort of things that were sort of happening in parallel with some of the women that we were touching base with as well.
So you mentioned that you have like a group that was leading this program. Were this group the group of mentors, or was it another layer?
Yeah, no. So the team, the Diseño team, were different people from different institutions. I mean, even though Joyce and I co-founded Designing Tangle Social Innovation Asia Pacific, we also had Carly Chen, who has a Taiwanese British background, also at Northumbria University, Kaminga Terapon, who's Thai, but in fact she was my PhD student, but graduated. And then we had Sarah Teasley, who's a Canadian-Japanese, Canadian-born, but Japanese PhD. So I guess there were various women in the hosting or the project program with diverse lived experiences as well. And the way that we invited women to the program was through our networks. So it wasn't big, but we were able to get like a good range of women from different countries around Asia Pacific in that way.
What do you recommend us to read, watch, or listen to that you are especially inspired at the moment?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I mean, there's so many things I am reading, but it's much more specific to the paper that I have to write, or there's a talk I need to deliver in India, so I'm trying to prepare for that. But I am, in general, personally really interested in the sort of geological time or deep time. And I have been warning everybody about the imminent, not quite sort of departure, but I have had a very long design career, and I really love to learn or go in the world of geology more. And part of that fascination comes from this land, well, again, this land called Australia, that had, the landscape itself traces the history of the planet in so many different, in this such a long, deep time way. But I'm such an amateur where I look at these rocks and look at these mountains that have, crumbled down, and I just have no idea what, anything. So I'm illiterate. And for me, and because of the sort of climate crisis or existential crisis, personally, the learning that I'm trying to do is with time, or about time, maybe. And it's a bit of a fascination for me right now.
Thanks a lot for this interview. Thank you, Yoko. The other day, a friend of mine asked me, "How come that you are still doing the interviews for the podcast?" I am not sure if I know why I continue. One answer could be that connecting people and ideas is one of the things that I enjoy most in my professional life. Mostly this happened through the podcast. Also, as Yoko said, it is a way of nurturing curiosity about each other's differences. I love to listen to what others are doing, and I learned a lot from it. It is simple. I think the format of the podcast, the interview, for me is a tool to learn. I am awake, attentive, and trying to ask good questions. Sometimes I manage, sometimes not. But in any case, I listen. This is my gift also to others that are eager and curious about different design practices in different parts of the world. I started to do this podcast as an attempt to connect with the Spanish-speaking world after many years of living in Helsinki, Finland. I was losing my professional language skills and also the contacts with the global south. Nelson Mandela said that if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Retrieving my language in my professional life was a way for me to explore my own roots. Now this podcast is getting more multilingual, but still with a strong spotlight in the South. We always want to hear what thoughts this episode sparkles you. You can contact us through our social media channels. As always, the music of this podcast is by Antonio Zimmerman, sound design is by Julian Pereira. This podcast is published with Creative Commons licenses with attributions. This was Diseño y Diáspora. You can follow us on social media channels in YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky, or visit our website. Remember to recommend us and recommend our books. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.